Goeiedag, baie welkom by Nuuspod. Ek weet ons het al baie oor daai medisyne gesels waaroor almal so stry. En daar is nog steeds nie klarigheid daaroor nie. Daar is nog steeds in die wetenskaplike wêreld nie klarigheid daaroor nie. Ons het verlede week met Dr Marthinus Viljoen gesels. Ek het gehou van Dr Viljoen se aanslag. Hy het nie hy het nie 'n onverbiddelikheid aan hom soos wat party mense in die debat aan beide kante het nie. So ek het nou nogal gehou van sy gesprek. Ek het nou vandag iemand by my om hierdie gesprek verder te voer. Sy is professor Colleen Aldous. Ek spreek dit reg uit, nee Colleen?
Dis okay, dis Colleen Aldous. Ja.
Okay, sorry, Colleen Aldous. En dan spreek ek dit nie reg uit nie. So ek het professor Colleen Aldous hier by my. Sy is 'n professor in gesondheidsorg wetenskappe by die Universiteit van Kwazulu Natal en sy het meer as 140 akademiese artikels gepubliseer en dit is alles in tydskrifte, vaktydskrifte wat geryk word as 'n mens dit nou so kan stel. So net om jou credentials hier te stel, Colleen, welkom, goeiemiddag by ons.
Baie dankie.
So, as ek die storie so kyk, dan het jy 'n goed genoeg rede om oor daai medisyne te mag gesels en jou mening hieroor te gee. En die rede hoekom ons met jou gesels is omdat jy as wetenskaplike en gerekende wetenskaplike so bietjie ander kant toe neig wanneer dit oor hierdie gesprek gaan en ek wil met jou daaroor gesels. Nou, vertel vir my wat is dit wat ons in hierdie hele debat oor daai medisyne verkeerd het?
Ek dink daar's baie mense wat sê daar is nie wetenskaplike navorsing oor die medisyne. En baie van die regulators sê so. Maar ek het daarna gekyk. In die begin van September het ek 165 gepubliseerde vaktydskrifte artikels gekry oor die medisyne. Van hulle is daar omtrent 37 geskryf oor eksperimente in mense. En ek gaan nou oorslaan na Engels as
alles reg, jy kan die hele tyd Engels gesels.
Thank you. Out of all of those published articles, and I particularly avoided preprints because of the problems we've had with people like the Algazar study and others. I've only looked at the published data. I've looked at where they've been published, which journals they've been published in, etc. From those 165 papers, 35 were on human trials, and they ranged from a case study in Mexico where a father who was a doctor treated his daughter with asthma and wrote up the case study. Now, a case study does not hold water in terms of research unless there's a lot of other evidence as well. So there's several other studies and there are some randomized control trials, but they're not very big. And they're not very big because the people who carried them out were the clinicians who first thought about using ivermectin on their patients. So they were not the large randomized double-blinded control trial that Big Pharma would carry out on a novel drug. These were doctors in their wards seeing if ivermectin will work. Now, those studies have received criticism from the regulators because they're not large randomized control trials. But if you have a look at each study, you will see that people have been honest about what they have looked at. They have been honest about using it with other drugs. We don't want a trial with ivermectin only. No disease can be treated with only one tablet. We need a cocktail of tablets. I mean, you look at HIV, TB, even flu. You don't give somebody just one tablet. And that's one of the criticisms, that there were other drugs given as well. So there is research out there. There's good research out there, but it's being dismissed by many of the regulators because it's not a large double-blinded randomized control trial. But when we look at evidence-based medicine is much bigger than just randomized control trials. And in a pandemic, we should be looking at the totality of the evidence. We should look at everything from these small human trials right up to the in silico, in vitro, the lab type studies, the countrywide studies, etc. I have discovered that many of the meta-analyses are, we've just got to toss them out because no matter which side of the coin you look at, people have got an agenda. So the meta-analyses I no longer trust. So I've excluded those in my decision making, and I would believe that a doctor who's done his reading has enough evidence now to make a type 1 error decision. That is to treat a patient with ivermectin if he feels the patient will benefit having read the articles. And even if later it comes out, which I doubt that it will, that ivermectin does not work, he's made a decision that's not harmed the patient and is likely to have helped the patient.
Colleen, when people criticize the medicine, they say it was invented for a parasite and not a virus, and therefore it cannot be used. Is one of the criticisms against the medicine. Yeah. Is that true? Does that hold water?
No, it doesn't hold water. Ivermectin was a natural substance. It wasn't created. And as a natural substance, its first action was seen as an anti-parasite. And it was used in both animals and in humans. And it did phenomenally well for humans. It changed the quality of life for millions of people, particularly in tropical areas where there were debilitating diseases that were caused by parasites, river blindness and elephantiasis being only 2. But that's not all that ivermectin has been studied for. Ivermectin has got other mechanisms of actions, and there are lots of papers on these other mechanisms too. It's been researched in cancer treatment, and it has previously been looked at as an antiviral. In fact, it was used in 2003 in laboratory studies against the first SARS virus, looking to see if there was an effectiveness there. But they've done a lot of research on other viruses, both animal viruses and human viruses, like West Nile virus, Chikungunya virus, dengue virus. It wasn't that effective in dengue virus, but there has been previous research on the antiviral activity of ivermectin, and the publications are there.
A lot of people say that this medicine was created for animals and not human beings. How credible is that criticism?
That is just, I want to say the word dof, because in 2015, the people who developed the drug, Amiro and Campbell, got the Nobel Award for Medicine. You only get that if it's affected human life. So they got the Nobel Award for the effect that it's had on humans. Yes, it was used in animals initially, but I mean, we use a lot of drugs in both animals and in humans. I mean, a lot of antibiotics are used in both. Some, I think, pain medications are used in both. Well, we're all mammals. I mean, if you can get some stuff at the vet that we can get at the pharmacy. So that argument actually does not hold water at all, particularly that Amiro and Campbell got the Nobel Award for that medication for human applications.
So, dan word daar gesê dat Ivermektien verantwoordelik is vir verskriklik baie lewersiektes en selfs mense se dood al veroorsaak het. Weet jy van so iets?
Nee, en as ek die mense vra, dan kan hulle nie vir my wys nie. And if you go and look, and I really would like people to do this themselves because it's open access, go to vigiaccess.org. That is the database that the WHO has on all side effects. So at vegieaccess.org, you just have to scroll to the bottom of the page and click that little thing that says you're not a computer. And you go to a page and you can put in any drug you want. And you can have a look at the side effects. And if you have a look at what's happened to ivermectin side effects over the last year, they've increased a lot, but that's because there's been a lot of people using them. So now we have, I think, 6,000 reports. And the deaths, I think, were 19 the last I looked, and all before the COVID pandemic. But just to give you an idea, some people tried to commit suicide with taking ivermectin, and they ended up unconscious in hospital, and they left without any permanent side effects a couple of weeks later. We had one person apparently did die, but he took warfarin at the same time. He was so for the fact that it kills people,
so do you think
kill you, I think is absurd.
So do you think that people that try to commit suicide with ivermectin got COVID in the end?
Well, I hope not. I hope they feel better and are looking after themselves.
Dis baie snaaks. Okay, maar nou ek vra altyd hierdie vraag vir almal wat ek mee gesels oor ivermektien. Wat is dit wat maak dat selfs wetenskaplikes, gerekende wetenskaplikes, hier sit ek voor jou, ek kan sien mos jy's 'n goeie wetenskaplike, ek het jou goed gelees, jy's 'n ernstige wetenskaplike, so is elke ander professor in wetenskaplike wat hulle uitlaat oor die saak ook. Hoekom verskil ons so verskriklik erg oor hierdie ding?
Ek dink omdat al twee kante reg is. It's not the miracle drug that people wanted it to be. That there's this extreme pro-ivermectin group that called it a miracle drug that was going to obliterate virus, and it's our only answer out. And if we have that, we don't need vaccines. And that is nonsense. Of course we need vaccines. Vaccines are what is going to give us herd immunity along with natural immunity. Ivermectin cannot address the immunity issue, not as far as I know. It's just a therapeutic. Some people have got results as a prophylactic, but to me, I see its role completely in the therapeutic. And we've got people who've been vaccinated who've got sick with with COVID. And they would need treatment, and early treatment with ivermectin. The research is showing definitely that ivermectin plays a good role in that. So we need it as a therapeutic, or in places, if there is a prophylactic use, and there appears to be from the literature so far, families that have not yet been vaccinated, then if we've got somebody in the house who's got COVID, you can give it to them prophylactically. And that's where I see a role, but I definitely do not see the role as an to replace the vaccine. So we've got these two poles. We've got people with a thought cage that anybody who wants an early treatment or a repurposed treatment or something that has been used previously for animals, they think that there's only one answer, and that's a vaccine, and that we'll be endangering the uptake of the vaccine if there is a therapeutic. And then on the other side, we've got people who genuinely believe that ivermectin would get us out of the pandemic without vaccines. And because both sides have got a point, and because both sides have got a frame of reference, this is fired up. But I think the problem is that we've got, in the mainstream media, we've got a dominant narrative, and that dominant narrative is that ivermectin shouldn't be used. And that's because people have not engaged with the research fully. And it's not in their interests to actually have the drug work.
So, kan jy vir ons verduidelik hoe hierdie medisyne werk ten opsigte van COVID-19? Wat is dit wat maak dat dit soms werk in van die pasiënte?
Look, there are many mechanisms of action, and I'm not going to pretend to know them all. I think they're well over 12, and I'm beginning to collate the literature, and I might be able to give you a very comprehensive answer in a few months. But the main one is where if the patient has been infected with a virus, then the virus cannot access the cell that it can go into to create more of itself and to make the patient sick, because ivermectin actually blocks its access into the cell. So that's the simplest way. So if you've got a cell that the virus would normally come into, infect, patient gets sick, we've now got a cell that is protected by ivermectin molecules to prevent that mRNA from going into the cell. It has other anti-inflammatory actions and various other actions that I cannot speak in depth, but that is the best known one, and why I feel it's appropriate to use in the viremic phase, which is early. Once a patient has been diagnosed, I believe that it does have an effect.
Daar's 'n ding wat mense doen wanneer hulle oor hierdie goed praat, is om te kyk na mediese wetenskaplike se kwalifikasie, en as jy dan nou 'n GP is en jy laat jou uit oor iets soos die medisyne waaroor ons praat, dan sal iemand sê, ag nee, wat man, dis sommer net 'n GP. Wat weet hulle nou? Is dit geldige kritiek teen dokters?
You know, I have realized in the last 8 months that the most knowledgeable people are the people at the front line. In our country, they're the GPs. The GPs have been seeing the patients first. They've been walking into the room and the GPs have been treating them. And so I personally feel that they are far more expert than anybody walking through the ivory tower corridors in big fancy academic hospitals. They've been treating patients for a long time. And that is how in our country, we've got some amazing GPs who have not lost patients at all. There are some specialists who've taken it up, but they've not lost patients because they've got their regimen, they've worked out the dosages, they talk to each other. They've got these amazing WhatsApp networks where they talk to each other about medications, about what they've read. I'm part of some of these groups, and I'm just so awe-inspired by the doctors who treat a patient for the cost of a consultation. There's no big fancy 5,000 Rand a tablet going there. There are people who are able to treat patients for the cost of a consultation, which means it's cheap medication. A lot of repurposed medication, lots of ivermectin has been used.
Daar is studies wat voorgelê word die afgelope tyd wat sê 'n finale verklaring maak en sê jammer, ivermektien help nie. Wat is jou kommentaar daarop?
Okay, those people did not read the entire document. And when I read all 37 of these papers a couple of weeks ago, I came across a very interesting phenomenon. Sometimes a paper will be titled something like ivermectin and its role in COVID-19. And when I read through it, at the end, it says, we did not get a statistical significance, but we used a very low dosage, and therefore we believe that you should be doing another study with a higher dose. Okay, so I found some articles like that. The two negative articles that everybody likes to use, the Lopez Medina study from Cali in Colombia, I think, and then there's the Vallejo study, also from South America. Their titles were ivermectin does not have an effect. But if you look at their results, the actual results showed that the people in the ivermectin arm did do better than in the control arm. It just did not reach statistical significance. And if you look at the limitations of the study, they themselves say that further research into ivermectin is required because they acknowledge that they probably used a low dose. And if we think about how this came about, the dosage of ivermectin for parasites treatment is very low. So initially last year, people were using low doses, and a lot of the trials were on low doses. But the doctors at the forefront, at the coalface of treatment have realized, based on other previous safety data, not just thumb sucking, based on a study by Gutso et al. In 2002, knowing how much is safe to take, the doses now are a lot higher. So a once a day dose for 5 to 10 days of higher doses is much more effective. And that's what doctors on the ground are now using. But those trials used a lot less. And in those published trials, I did not find one trial that said ivermectin is futile in this pandemic. I also did not find anywhere where they said there were any extra side effects. In fact, where they did mention safety data, they said there were no more side effects than there were in the control arm, or that there were no extra side effects mentioned at all. So when it comes to safety issues and Merck's document from February saying the safety concerns, it's maybe because there hasn't been a safety concern. And people are writing it up, but in these studies, we didn't see any safety concerns.
So, kom ons sê dit nou vir mekaar in gewone taal. Ek kan onthou, ek het eendag met 'n veearts gesels, hoe en hy het vir my gesê dat hierdie medisyne is so veilig soos om 'n disprin te drink. Is dit die algemene gevoel?
Ja. En jy kan weer kyk na vegieaccess.org, gaan kyk net na paracetamol en gaan kyk na ivermectin. Gaan kyk na al die ander medisyne wat hulle vir jou gee. En jy sal 'n baie veilige medisyne.
So, en jy is oortuig daarvan niemand wat jy van weet is nog dood as gevolg van Ivermektien of hulle het hulle self oordoseer en het allerlei lewerskade en sulke goed tot dusver opgedoen nie.
Weet jy, daar was 'n gesin in Pietermaritzburg verlede jaar in die begin van die pandemie wat gehoor het van Ivermektien, toe vat hulle 'n hele botteltjie. Toe's 2 van hulle in die hospitaal opgeneem. Hulle was siek. As jy baie hoë dosisse vat, kan jy nie mooi sien nie. 'n Paar dae is hulle by die huis en hulle neem nou Ivermektien by die huis in die regte dosering en hulle neem dit vir prophylaxis.
En kan hulle nou beter sien?
Ja, hulle kan sien. Hulle kan baie beter sien. The side effects are transient. So high doses, and I know that there are doctors in Africa that I've been working with, where the patients come in, there are no hospital beds, so they've been pumping their patients with ivermectin, with high doses. They warn the patients they're going to have vision problems, but within a few hours they resolve. So all the side effects that we know of do resolve. There's nothing permanent that we know of from ivermectin so far. And certainly liver damage. And if you have a look at what COVID does in certain patients, COVID causes severe liver damage.
Professor Colleen Colleen, baie dankie dat jy met Nuuspod gepraat het. My tong wil vanmiddag al oor my tande val, maar dankie dat jy tyd gemaak het. Ek dink is hierdie deurmekaar Engels en Afrikaans, want ek praat mos maar Engels soos 'n Vrystater, jong.
Maar ek praat Afrikaans soos iemand van Durban is.
Maar dankie.
Ons kan mekaar daarom verstaan.
Dankie dat jy met ons gepraat het. Dit is 'n kort gesprek, maar ek dink dit is daarom 'n bietjie belangrike inligting ook wat dit vervat. Ek praat weer met jou.
Baie dankie, ek sal bly wees.
Goed hoor, Tara.
Verkeersboetes behels meer as 'n klein ongerief met minimale gevolge. Jy kan 'n kriminele rekord kry of probleme teekom as jy jou rybewys of motorlisensie hernie. En die metropolisie kan jou by padblokkades lastigval om die boetes te betaal. Fines for you vir minder moeite met verkeersboetes deur hul te monitor en vinnig, wetlik en effektief af te handel, sodat jy nie die ongewenste gevolge hoef te dra nie. Ons spesialiseer in groot vlote en streef daarna om jou geld te bespaar. Kontak ons gerus op 011 867 7331 of besoek ons webtuiste by www.finesforyou.co.za.
Nuuspod, onbevange, onbegrens, onbevooroordeeld.